Architect Michael Ong Chin Keong of BYG Architecture. Architect Michael Ong began his architectural practice as a graduate architect in BYG in 1996 and in 2004 went on to become one of the key partners that helped establish BYG Group, which is today a leading consulting firm that offers architectural, town planning, and project management services under one roof. As an architect, urban planner, and registered conservator, he is personally involved in the conceptualizing and design development of many of the firm's notable and award-winning projects. While BYG does not subscribe to a fixed style of architecture, their design approach to projects have always been pivoted on simplification of space planning and form, with no compromise on functionality and efficiency, yet are distinctly defined with touches of individuality. He personally believes in deriving his architecture from the spirit of place and the context of site, placing great emphasis on public realms to generate social activities that rejuvenate spaces into places. Today, his talk will be focusing on the importance of designing places for people that contribute to the success of BYG's selected urban projects. So please welcome Architect Michael Ong.
Good morning, all. Yes, thank you, Pam, for inviting me to this forum. This is my son. He's 7 years old. I'm considered a late bloomer in fatherhood. Over the 2-year period of the pandemic, it was an eye-opener for me to see him going through classes in a virtual environment. But in the same period, over the last year, my wife and I had been weekend farmers. So this is the type of response that my son had when he's exposed to the nature. Can you imagine him taking the tree worms in his hands? It led me to believe and to conclude that human is naturally having this affinity to nature. So this is what I'm trying to bring to the talk today, that at the end of the day, even despite the fact that we are moving into a virtual environment, ultimately we're back to nature. So in the introduction by the MC just now, I did mention that BYG do not subscribe to any fixed architecture. So if you look at the following, these are the unique quotes from architects, super architects: form, full function, less is more. Our answer to the above is E, all of the above. In architecture, these are the type of architecture that has been evolving over the years. So, is there a right or wrong to it? So today I will be sharing some of our projects, which involves a lot of public spaces. And the topic of the talk will be curating spaces into places. In 2006, we were commissioned to undertake a mixed development on a 10-acre plot flanked by 𝗗𝗔𝗧𝗨𝗠 Drive and Jalan Kelawai. Now, smack right in the middle of the site is this Category 2 heritage building. This is a 100-year-old building that was built in the early 1900s, and over a span of 20 years, an annex training and accommodation facilities were added on. So the Category 2 applies only to this portion of the building, which is actually a chapel, a very small structure in comparison to the entire ensemble. This is the internal space of the chapel with vaulted ceiling, stained glass, and this huge marble slab that has been here from day one. This is the back facade of the next building facing Jalan Kelawai. So the natural solution that came up from the client back then was to move the entire building all the way to Kelawai Road to maximize the potential of developing the land. So this is the challenge for us. As I mentioned just now, this is the front portion of the St. Joe Chapel that is category 2. The green portion at the back is the annex building. We took a different approach because we decided to take this on not just as a challenge, but we embrace it as a solution. We decided to make it the key feature for the entire development. And what we did was, from 𝗗𝗔𝗧𝗨𝗠 Drive, we actually brought in a circulation space to St. Joe. The same goes with Jalan Kelawai, another circulation space to go to St. Joseph. And we built a plaza, an oval plaza around the heritage building. So instead of taking it as a challenge, as a problem, we decided to celebrate the building, to make it as an icon for the entire development. So today, you probably see this as the only mall that has a conservation building in the middle of the entire scheme. So from the 𝗗𝗓 Drive entrance, this is introduced as a linear plaza while deliberately separating the two buildings, the two condo towers, celebrating this building, which is the category 2 building. This is a chapel. It's very ornate. And what we have is we have a lot of alfrescoes facing this portion of the building. And it also has a lot of corridors and verandaways overlooking this building, giving it a life-size icon that you can actually appreciate from all levels. And today, this is not just a plaza. This is actually a place that people go to, people enjoy with events throughout the year. Things like this. So this is the importance that I am beginning to realize, especially after going through the 2-year pandemic period. We need to get out. We need to let loose. And spaces like this, for architects, it's amazing because you are not just creating a space, you are creating a space for people to use them to define the space, ultimately. And this is the back portion of the annex building that's facing the internal part of the mall. So it is also celebrated in a way, but in a different way, because this is a triple volume atrium. So as you approach the mall from Jalan Kelawai, this is what you'll be seeing. And again, we emphasize the importance of this space. It houses all these fashion events during Fashion Week 2019. Well, this is the view of the entire development. So you've got the 2 super condos facing 𝗗𝗓𝗧𝗨𝗠 Drive. This is the waterfront portion. And the back portion facing Jalan Kelawai. This is St. Joseph Novitiate, which is celebrated as the center focal point of the entire development. Well, while BYG do not subscribe to any style of architecture per se, we do still believe in deriving our concepts or our design from the site. So this is a portion that's facing the sea, which has a lot of curvilinear elements, which echoes the sea and the aerodynamics of wind, leading to St. Joseph Novitiate. Well, this is what you're seeing, the entire plaza space. And at the back, Jalan Kelawai is unique in the sense that it's a tree-lined boulevards. The entire street is filled with a lot of large trees with big canopies, which prompted us to actually design the back facade to kind of reflect and talk to the surrounding of all these large trees. So the canopy is reflected, and you notice that there's kind of a similar communication happening here. And one of the things that actually put us in the world map for this project is the conservation of this Category 2 building. It won a Silver Award, World, and this picture was taken during construction when we lifted the entire building to put in 3 levels of basement car park below it. Well, you notice the date, that was back in 2009. Well, credit goes to Arup, our engineer for the project. But until today, I could remember this. This was just one day after my birthday. So this is what you're getting right now in the night when you get the silhouette of the trees and the canopy. You know, it feels like it's just set into place. About the same time, parallel to the construction of Gani Paragon, we were commissioned to undertake the redevelopment of PISA, which is Penang Indoor Stadium and Aquatic Center. This is a 25-acre land flanked by 3 major roads. This is the road that leads to the airport. So if you're in Penang and if you travel to the airport from the town, you wouldn't miss this building. So back then, the RFP called by the state was very simple, to just put a new convention center on this park, which is almost 7 acres of land. But there are 3 existing buildings, the Aquatic Center, the Indoor Stadium, and the multi-story car park. You notice that the planning back then, the way it's laid out is, all these buildings are standalone buildings fragmented by roads. So it's not very friendly. You've got a parameter road that goes all around. Of course, it's a nice place to jog. One loop is 800 meters. So this was the condition of the building back then. Very dilapidated. This is the the aquatic center. You notice that the pool was already leaking at that point in time. The building was only 15 years old, but it was in a very derelict state with leakage, with cracks and all these things happening. And the car park is obviously not popular as a standalone car park, which is completely separated from the other buildings. Malaysians, being Malaysians, we would drive right up to the indoor stadium if we can. So this was the dream that we sold to the state at that time. I think we won over the chief minister then with this image. What we wanted was to create something which is subtle, not in your face. And we also want to address the issues that was raised at that point in time. The public is concerned that there's going to be a loss of urban green, which is almost 7 acres. So what we did was we thought, you know, why don't we reinstate the 7 acres on the roof of the convention center? So this is what it is today. Well, this was taken perhaps 2 years back. The hotel is under construction now. This is the convention center. The components of this development, basically you've got a convention center with a rooftop park, the existing PISA building or the indoor stadium, and this is the aquatic center. And you notice we also added on some new components. We felt that we do not want to just create a convention center. Ultimately, a convention center is still a private facility. We thought that this building will only thrive if we think of the public as one of the main components that is going to bring this space up. So the public park is literally public. Publics can just go up and enjoy the park. The aquatic center was originally designed and built for international events. But we decided to turn it around and make it a community club. So we have got pools, recreational pools, no longer for events, for competitive events. We added on a water theme park, and we added on badminton hall, multi-purpose hall, gym, etc. And to actually capitalize on the road frontage of the building, we added on a retail a cluster of retail activities. So we have F&B and offices fronting all the roads. And of course, this canopies, this series of canopies is actually celebrating the entrance to this commercial component. So this is what you're seeing from the aerial view. Well, the story behind SPICE is currently called SPICE Arena. Now, SPICE stands for Subterranean Penang International Convention and Exhibition. We are very proud. Well, Ben, my partner, my founding partner, is here. CK is also here, another partner of ours. We actually came up with this naming, and it continued on today. So the idea was to actually lift up the entire ground to place the Subterranean Convention Center below. But when design development took place, reality sets in. There was a call for more car parks. We added one layer of car park below the convention center, which elevate the building bit by bit. And currently, it's only subterranean down. It depresses down to only 15 feet from the road level. So it also means to say that we actually have to lift the entire park up. But it works out quite well. And we have this iconic feature here. Basically, we call it an iconic roof. It's made up of 1,600 pieces of glasses cut, customized to sizes. So no one glass is the same over here. And the way it's designed, again, the credit goes to the engineer. It's like a handkerchief, right? Made rigid and only pivoted on the four corners. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it spans 120 meters and 34 meter deep and 24 meter high. That means it's literally an 8-story building at the porch. So it gives you that sense of welcoming and grandness about it. And it also gives you, at the same time, when we talk about SPICEs, we also want to open it up to make it more friendly to the public. The original design, the original scheme, has a perimeter fencing that goes around the entire 25-acre site. We felt that in order to make this place public, we have to open it up. So we removed all the fencing, and we created all these walkways around with lush greens and trees, and made it friendly for people. I think as architects, we need to be serious, we need to be sensitive about this. It's not just designing what we want. It's actually designing for the people. And ultimately, the people are the ones that's going to define your architecture. So this is the iconic roof. Of course, it has got this series of colors. And I remember back then, when we were doing all this testing of the lighting, it was a week before Deepawali. I, for one, I do not like too many colors. So I was jokingly telling the project manager, who's called Anil, then, that I told him it's too early for Deepawali. So this is the cross-section of the building, which shows you, again, from the street level, the canopy and the drop-off, which is depressed down, and the layer of basement below. And this is what you're getting as you drop off. So the experience will be different. If you're dropping off at street level, you'll be looking at the busy street. Now, in this case, that opportunity is given to you to actually experience a different sense of arrival. You don't see the cars, you're faced with a wall of cascading water, and this gives an almost completely different feel than what you feel if you are dropping off at the street level. So this is the internal part of the foyer, double volume space with breakup rooms. This is the pre-function area. Now we pride this SPICE to be the biggest ballroom in Penang. It can cater up to 6,000 people for a ballroom dinner. Now that's pre-COVID. We will probably have to cut it down to actual size now. This is the pre-function area, and this is the ballroom. This is only one of the ballrooms. there are actually 4 ballrooms together, and all these are pillarless, column-free. And to top it up, we actually make the spaces for exhibitions as well. This is a picture of seeing how people are responding to this space. And what I'm truly proud of is the 7-acre park, that we managed to sell this idea, and it kind of like brought over the decision of the state to actually award this project to Setia. The rest of the pictures speaks for themselves. Okay, more pictures. So besides the park, we actually have a huge playground for children. It's very lively, and it's very safe. So the difference between this park and a lot of the normal parks would be the level of safety that you feel. You're elevated above the ground, away from traffic, and actually parents actually feel very safe to let the children run around. And it's actually busy throughout the day until the night. So this is a view of the overall park with a lot of connectivity built into it, because the entire development now has got 5 major components, and all of them has to be linked up with connectivity. So again, when we design this in mind, we actually have to think about the end users to make sure that they are the ones, the convenience of them going around. Okay, now we come to the next building, which is the Aquatic Center. This was the picture taken before it was refurbished. This is now. So what we did was, of course, we facelift the facade, and this is the commercial component that is wrapping around the Aquatic Center, fronting the street. So originally, these were all spectators sitting. It goes all around the entire pool. But now that we wanted to change this into a community club, we decided to take away all the sittings and replace them with badminton courts, squash courts. And this is how people are responding to the space now, because again, it's a community place. Well, the diving pool is still there. Scuba diving. And you get this. This is how people are enjoying the space. Okay, I think. All right, so I did mention just now that the entire pool is now surrounded by all these commercial components. This is the drop-off area for the commercial cluster, inverted canopies. All right, let's come to the indoor stadium. Again, like I mentioned, at that point in time when this was taken up, there was a lot of leakage, a lot of spaces were left unused. So this is now, we took a much easier approach because the building itself is already there. So what we wanted to do was to actually add on a new layer of skin to give it a fresh look. So this is the internal space. Now, the next project is pretty interesting. I just brought this in last minute as an interlude because BYG is not just all work and no play. This project happened in 2017 when Butterworth Fringe Festival came about, and this was organized by Think City. So we decided to participate in this installation called Temple of Colors. Simple. The site that we were given is this area which is right next to the existing Indian temple. So as you know, Indian temples are colorful, very monumental with their gopuram. So we decided to do something that contrasts the temple from an irregular shape to something which is regular, just a simple cube. All these ornates are replaced with pixels, and these are all made up of 25,000 plastic bottles. So we wanted to create that surreal experience of getting into the space, seeing how the colors reflect against the bottles and water. Some of the bottles, we actually put in water. So we got one of our clients to sponsor us for the construction of this cube. We took out a very, very easy way of doing this, because these are all just BRC mesh, 2-inch by 2-inch. And the simple thing that we did was to just bring in the plastic bottles and slot it in. Of course, there are 25,000 bottles altogether. And we've got our colleagues to help out. And along the way, we've got some of the people who live around the area who came in and participated in what we did. So we built a shed over it. So this was work in progress. And this is what you see when we hung the thing to create a cloud-like experience made up of all these bottles filled with water. And it's amazing how light gets reflected through all these transparent materials. And this is taken during sunset. It gives you that very warm feeling about this. So sometimes in architecture, as architects, I think, yeah, we are accustomed to hard work. We work late nights. But sometimes we just need to sit back and relax and just capture some of these vivid images in our mind, because this lasts. And the completed building, these are the plastic bottles, and these are the silhouette of me and a colleague inside. And this is what it is at night. So you get the silhouette of people inside. And it's good, and it's amazing to see how people respond to a space like this. Right? So people of all age actually went in. Either they are, they feel awe by the space, they feel amazed. There was actually a video. One of a kid actually went in and did a dance, a hip-hop dance, and posted in YouTube. So, this is how people respond to this simple spaces that is created. Let me bring you to Georgetown. Now, because I'm from Penang, you won't run away from the fact that, we'll be talking about Georgetown World Heritage Site. I think one of the speakers, the Ada winner, Diana, will be talking about that as well. So we know, historically, Georgetown is a robust city when it was a trading town. And in 2008, Georgetown was inscribed as a World Heritage Site. Now, the area which comes under the inscription is actually 260 hectares, huge. Talking about 400 hectares, 400 over acres of land. And if you look at the figure here, the population in 2009, 1 year after the inscription, we're talking about 10,159 population. In 2013, the population dwindled down to 9,425. And you notice that records were showing that out of 3,643 units of shophouses, almost 40% of them are vacant. So the issues that is quite prevailing right now is instead of celebrating a living heritage, it becomes a de-living heritage. There's a phenomenon called dead city syndrome. The likeness of what you see over in Venice or Hoi An, there's this situation where the entire city now becomes more of a Disneyland, a theme park, with only day population but no night population. So there's also a question whether the city is meant for cars or for human. And is the city so tourist-centric that it becomes just a tourist destination? What happens to the real people that's supposed to live in a city? So we work on this project in collaboration with the local authority as well as a private developer. I remember back then, after the 2018 World Urban Forum in KL, the client actually called me up and said, hey, I want to explore doing micro-housing. I think there was a prototype built by Topology, right? So when he spoke to me, I said, yeah, okay. I knew then that he had a lot of properties in the World Heritage Site, rows of shop houses that are vacant. So I suggested to him, why don't we look at what is existingly available? These are the low-hanging fruits. The building is already there. Why don't we look at converting some of this space and take the opportunity to bring people back to the city? Well, this is happening since 2009, 1 year after the inscription, 2013 and 2019. The density of restaurants and bars is kind of exploded in Georgetown. While there were so many new bars and restaurants, most of them also closed down within like 3-4 months, sometimes 6 months. It goes to say, and it goes to question, whether this is actually sustainable for a World Heritage Site. I have to actually thank Think City for this data that they shared. So one of the things that I'm trying to show here is that if you look at the vacant units, this is like from 2009 all the way down, there has been a constant decline. So this is the 9 units of shop houses. All these 9 units is in an ensemble and owned by the same owner. So we know that Georgetown World Heritage Site is also quite strict in the provision of its conservation guidelines. So unlike some of the examples shared by the previous speakers where they could build over shop houses, this cannot happen in Georgetown. But realizing that 40% of the shops are vacant, why don't we work around it? Most of the time you'll notice that the ground floor are the ones that's taken up, but the upper floors are all left vacant. So if you look at the shop house typology, which is very dominant in the Straits Settlement, typically the land use pattern is pretty much shops on the ground floor and living units on the top. So we come back to the typology, shop house. Well, shop house is basically shop and house. But the typology back then was more relevant to the trading businesses where they live. The people who run the business also live in the city, so they have got individual staircases that bring you to upstairs. So we were exploring this possibility of, number one, retaining all the activities. That means on the ground floor, this remains as shops. It could be cafe, it could be restaurants and whatnot. But the upper floors, make it into bite-sized units to encourage young people, students, working people, dinkies, back to the city. So the entry to the units will be, to the shops or the commercial activities will still be from the main roads, while the entry to the units for residential will be from the back lane. So in this particular exercise, what we did was we actually split the upper floors into 2 units with a corridor in the middle. So on the ground floor, the veranda way is still there. So the outlook of the building remains the same. This is a requirement of the guideline. And what we did was we kind of like created a continuous corridor on the ground floor to link up all these spaces. At that point in time when we were doing this proposal, the client also managed to get a single tenant to take up the entire place. It's called Forward School. It's a high-tech school. And the tenant decided to also rent out the living spaces on the upper floors. So now Forward School is not just a school, it's also a co-work space. So the entrance to the units now is actually from behind. Instead of having individual staircases in all the units, we decided to take away the staircase and retain only 2 staircases to comply to the firefighting requirement. So on the upstairs, you have a common lounge that brings you upstairs and a corridor which links up the entire unit. And all these corridors are actually naturally ventilated because they are facing a series of air wells. So unlike a hotel, you get an enclosed space as a corridor. This is actually with natural lighting and ventilation. So forward school is, the space below would be the spaces for the school and the co-work space. And this is the entrance to the living quarters behind. So this is the frontage of the school. So we still retain the characteristics of shophouses because that's a requirement. The internal space. So this is the punctuation that we did for the entire 9 units of shops. One of the requirements that needs to be taken care of is that you cannot simply take away walls and make openings. We only open up about 15% of the walls to create all these openings. Cafe. And this is the lobby that leads you to the residential units above. This is the corridor. So each unit of this, each unit is sized at about 380 square feet. And currently, if I'm not wrong, I actually had an interview with some of the people who are staying here. And 2 of the people that I spoke to were actually working people. One of them working from this place itself because he doesn't have an office. So he works around in a co-work office. And they find that living in the city is very convenient for them. So in a way, this test case is proven quite successful in the sense that you actually get all these young people to actually live in the city. But the sad thing is, of course, the opening of this building was back in February 2020, right at the beginning of the MCO. So this is a typical unit converted into a Soho. And some of these are also converted into office space as well. Very small group of people. Now, the next project I would like to look at is the 𝗗𝗧𝗨𝗠 Urban Archaeological Park. Now, say if we look at the entire Georgetown, whenever we look into a township planning right now, all these new townships will be talking about learn, live, work, play. Now, one of the things that is quite missing in Georgetown is the recreational part of it. If you notice that the entire 260 hectares that I mentioned earlier on, the amount of green space or recreational space in the city is just this much. All these green pockets of spaces, this is not even a park per se, this is the Esplanade. There's a small park called Armenian Park, which doesn't have playground. And we are now looking at this site, which is close to 5 acres, and it belongs to the state. It originally was planned as phase 5 for Komta. The original plan was to have a few blocks of high-rise building for residential. So this is where the site is in context to Komta. And this whole area is actually a lot of commercial activities, and this was meant to be a residential activity. So if in context of the urban planning, it is actually located at the edge of the World Heritage Site, but it became sensitive because the first layer that faces the World Heritage Site is subject to a lot of requirements under the UNESCO listing. So this is what it was then. A little bit of history about 𝗨𝗨𝗧𝗨𝗠. It is called Town's End. 𝗨𝗨𝗧𝗨𝗨 means the end of the town. Well, that was then when Penang was still growing at the beginning stage. So this site has got a canal called Prangin Canal that leads you all the way to the sea. And these are the images taken before the development or the renewal. You actually have a canal basin. Those days, historically, ships will actually park away from the shore, and all these small prahus or small sampans will collect the goods and bring them inland through this water canal. And this is kind of like the trading area where they move the products around. So this is a picture depicting the scenario back then. These 2 columns here are still here today. And because this was originally a ditch, I would say, it was really dirty, smelly. So this was a picture taken in 1937. Again, the Perangi market and the canal. So back then, sampans still come in land. So the first exercise we did was actually to restore the canal. Not in the sense that we're going to reuse it. We actually repurpose it for recreational purposes. The actual drainage was diverted at the site of the existing canal to bring the drain water to the sea, while this was actually retained as more like a pond. So the entire construction took less than a year. So this is some pictures of the completed projects. Now, out of the entire scheme of things, we are only working on phase 1, which is the park portion. And there's still almost half a portion which is supposed to be phase 3. The image of the conserve market before it was renewed. And it becomes a place for activities as well. Sadly, again, after its completion, then we are into lockdown and all. So you don't really get that sort of vibes after during that two-year period. And the canal becomes kind of like a backbone of the entire proposal. You have people walking around and you've got fishes and all. I think it also came out in the papers at one time. People applauding the effort by the state to convert that drain into such a nice natural water feature. But no, this is actually a pond. I have to qualify that. This is what it is now. And we actually incorporated a playground. Again, this goes in line with the repopulation exercise that we're working on with the local authority. In order to bring people to live in the city, you also have to provide them spaces to meet, to recreate, all right? And this is what it is at night. We raised up platforms to create leveling. Otherwise, the entire park will be just one flat ground. The Chief Minister and the EXCO members and the park. And one of the areas that we are looking at to increase green in the city, of course, it's very difficult when it's completely built up to get a place that you can actually convert into parks. So there's this movement going on right now. There's an attempt to actually create more parks by repurposing the back lanes into a series of linear parks, linking up the city. It becomes a walkable city. These areas would be purely for bicycle and for pedestrians, all right? So with a total of 9 kilometers now, you have a 10-acre linear park. So some of the simple things that we do to spark off all this repopulation agenda is to make sure that the city becomes comfortable for walking and for cycling. It calls for the reduction of cars in the city. But of course, a lot of people would not agree to that. But if you think about it, pedestrian is king, all right? And in order to bring people to the city, you actually have to work all these things together, reducing the cars, creating more walkable space, creating more comfort by bringing in trees and landscaping. So we just took on this as a CSR project. It's just a small portion in front of Yap Temple. This is in Armenian Street. And as you know, Armenian Street is pretty much the heart of the World Heritage Site. So we just, we tried to reduce the width of cars to avoid all this illegal parking. And we purposely planted trees to create shades and whatnot. So now you don't get illegal parking, that's one. And you find that it's actually quite comfortable to walk in the streets if you've got all these trees. And over the years, this is also happening. Back lanes are repurposed into parks. And this is actually done by another architect, Melo. All right, the last project that I would like to showcase is Business Improvement District scheme. We are looking at this portion of land which is green. This entire zone is called BIDS, Business Improvement District. Komta, and you've got Gamma, you've got all the shopping centers all clustered around this area. Now, at the same time, as you know, our mayor, who is an architect himself, is an ardent cyclist. So he's got this program called Bike on Fridays. On every Friday, they will cycle from Pasir Kapal Singh all the way to the town, to the city center. And this is the connectivity is kind of missing, leading to the town center. Where is the town center? If you look at Georgetown, you could ask yourself, where is the town center? So actually, if you look at the map, the 0 mile location is actually right in front of Gamma. This is Gamma, and this is Komta. So that intersection is actually the 0 mile for Georgetown. So historically, that was called in Chinese 国八丁. 国八丁 means 5 traffic lights. So because there are a lot of intersections, it was at one time also a roundabout. So realizing that, we came out with this suggestion back then, that was the then mayor, to create this celebration of that 0 mile. We create this centrum effect with steel structures and whatnot. Of course, this remained as an idea. And ultimately, the council said, let's work on the Baby Beats scheme, which is a smaller version. Of course, to try and bring connectivity to where Centrum is. So this entire street, which is called Jalan 𝗗𝗧𝗨𝗠, is already building itself up. If those of you who are familiar with Penang and Hin Bus Depot, so this is where Jalan 𝗗𝗧𝗨𝗠 is, and Hin Depot is somewhere around here. So we were commissioned to just renew and rejuvenate the streets, at the same time linking the cyclist network all the way to the city. So the entire street was landscaped, and we actually separated the walking and the cycling. And actually it culminated with these pillars of Sustainable Development Goals, which was constructed at the same time as the Asia Pacific Urban Forum. It was actually a request by Datuk Seri Maimunah at the time, saying that, hey, you need to do something, you need to create something that happens hand in hand with Asia Pacific Urban Forum. So this is a subtle reminder that this is a center point of the entire city in the day. And we want to make the place safe and comfortable for walking again, to bring back population to the city. One of the things that came to mind is that this Jalan 𝗗𝗧𝗨𝗠 is also very popular for foreign workers, But in planning spaces, you have to be inclusive. You cannot reject the reality that foreigners are also human. They are also people. So despite the fact that it's used mostly by the foreign workers, it's also fine. Again, we are building a city which is inclusive. So this is my last slide. Now, coming back to beyond, you notice that I show you more pictures of people rather than buildings. Because ultimately, we believe, at least for me, I believe that your architecture is defined by the people, not yourself. We constantly have to remind ourselves as architects, despite the fact that we like to build icons, we like to do great things, we want to be remembered. That's the part that we can't run away, because we are architects and that's a natural ego. But ultimately, we must remind ourselves we are not building for ourselves. We are building for the people who are going to use the space. So with that, I urge all of you to design for people. Thank you very much.